Christmas dinner is supposed to mean family, laughter, and love, but in my family it meant something else entirely. When my parents were planning Christmas dinner, they asked my sister Olivia exactly what she wanted. Every dish, every dessert, while my kids sat quietly beside me, invisible. Then my dad looked right at me and said my children could eat whatever. Leftovers were in the kitchen because they weren't guests. Olivia laughed and said I should pay for her meals too. Everyone else acted like it was normal, but something inside me broke. I looked at my children's faces and knew I couldn't stay silent anymore. Have you ever stayed silent so long that when you finally spoke, it changed everything? Tell me in the comments, because that night, when I finally spoke, my family had no idea what was coming. The cold December air stung my cheeks as I tightened my grip on Grace's hand and urged Ethan to keep up. The Parker estate rose in front of us, glowing with hundreds of twinkling white lights strung across the massive oak trees and along the stone pillars. I had driven my old Beagle all the way from our small apartment in Dorchester to the suburbs of Boston, where the streets curved around manicured lawns, and every house looked like it, belonged in a glossy magazine spread. My parents' mansion, with its 8 bedrooms and white columns, always stood out the most. I balanced the warm pie dish in my other hand, feeling the sweet scent of cinnamon and apples seep through the foil. Grace carried a small gift bag she had decorated herself with red paper cutouts, while Ethan trudged beside me, holding onto the edge of my coat like he always did when he felt nervous. As we walked up the stone step, the front door opened before I could reach for the bell. Helen, the longtime housekeeper, gave me a small smile. Her eyes flicked toward the dining room and she whispered, "It's tense tonight. Be careful." Then she quickly took the pie from my hands and my kids' coats, her kindness the only warmth I expected to find here. The voices of my parents echoed through the wide entry hall. My dad's tone was sharp, clipped with authority, and my mom's laugh carried its usual note of superiority. I guided Grace and Ethan into the living room. My parents sat on their usual perch, my mom in her silk blouse and pearls, my dad with his tailored suit even on Christmas Eve. Olivia lounged across the velvet sofa, her blonde hair in perfect waves, legs crossed, a glass of wine balanced effortlessly in her hand. "Oh, you made it," she said without rising. "For a moment I thought you might have gotten lost again." "We had car trouble," I answered softly, guiding the children closer. "But we're here now." My dad folded his newspaper and glanced at his watch. "Punctuality is a virtue, Emily. It seems you've forgotten that." Olivia smirked, swirling her wine. Maybe if she had a real car instead of that rusty thing, she wouldn't always have these problems. Ethan stiffened next to me, his little hand tightening around mine. I pretended not to hear, but my heart sank, knowing he had. "Dinner is nearly ready," my mom announced, already turning back to Olivia. "But before we eat, we should decide on the Christmas menu for tomorrow." My dad reached into his breast pocket and pulled out his small leather notebook, the one he usually used for investment ideas. "All right," he said, "why don't we hear from our guest of honor first? Olivia, what would you like for Christmas dinner?" Olivia's smile widened as if she had been waiting all night for that invitation. "Well, I was thinking of roasted prime rib with garlic butter. Maybe lobster tails too. And definitely that truffle macaroni and cheese from the catering company. Oh, and champagne, of course." "Excellent," my dad said as he scribbled in his notebook. "Margaret, what about sides?" "I'll prepare my cranberry orange relish and order those petit fours from the French bakery," she replied. "And dessert," Olivia chimed in, leaning forward. "I want chocolate soufflé, the one with the raspberry glaze." As they spoke, I glanced at Grace and Ethan. Their faces lit up at the mention of chocolate, but they stayed silent, waiting politely, as they always did. I gave them an encouraging nod. My dad shut his notebook with a satisfied thud and looked around the room. "Well, that settles it. A perfect menu." The silence that followed pressed heavily against my chest. Grace shifted in her seat, her lips parting slightly as if she might ask about her favorite pumpkin pie, but my mom cut her off with a wave of her manicured hand. "Your children can eat whatever leftovers are in the kitchen," she said smoothly. "They're not guests here." The words landed like a slap across my face. Ethan's hand tightened so hard in mine I thought my fingers might bruise. Grace's eyes filled with confusion, her small body stiffening beside me. I felt my throat close, my breath caught between outrage and despair. Olivia laughed, a short, sharp sound. Don't take it personally, Emily. You should be grateful they even get a seat at the table. My dad leaned back, crossing his legs. Go set the table like a good girl. That's what you're good at, isn't it? Taking care of details. For a moment, the room blurred around me. The sparkling chandelier, the scent of pine from the towering Christmas tree, the faint crackle of the fireplace. All I could see were my children's faces, pale and silent, their dignity stripped in front of the people who should have cherished them. I wanted to shout, to slam the pie dish onto the floor, to drag my children out and never return. But years of practice kept me rooted in my seat, my expression neutral. I reached for their hands instead, squeezing gently. Grace's voice was barely a whisper. Mom, did we do something wrong? I forced a smile, though my heart ached. No, sweetheart, you did nothing wrong. Olivia reclined back against the sofa, lifting her glass of wine as if to toast her own victory. My parents resumed their casual chatter, discussing table settings and guest lists, as though my children's humiliation had never happened. I sat there quietly, a smile fixed on my lips. But inside, something shifted. I looked at the glittering ornaments on the Christmas tree and realized I had been here too many times before. Always silent, always swallowing the insult. This time felt different. This time I could feel a spark rising in my chest, one that I could no longer ignore. The sound of clinking glasses filled the room as Olivia laughed again, and my dad nodded along with her. Grace lowered her head, and Ethan leaned against me, his little shoulders trembling. I held them close, my smile steady, even as I knew something inside me was breaking free. And at that moment, surrounded by golden light and expensive decorations, I decided that this Christmas would not end the way they expected. I was 10 the first time I realized my place in the Parker family was different from my sister's. That birthday still sits heavy in my chest whenever December rolls around. My cake had been a simple sheet cake from the local grocery store, vanilla with too much icing that made my teeth ache. There were no balloons, no streamers, no friends filling the backyard, just my parents, Olivia and Helen, carrying the cake to the dining room table. Olivia clapped her hands dramatically and leaned forward to blow out the candles with me, stealing the moment as she always did. My mom had snapped a few quick photos, then hurried to take a phone call. By the time the candles were cleared, the day already felt forgotten. But when Olivia's birthday came each spring, the house transformed. The grand staircase was wrapped in flowers, a string quartet played in the living room, and caterers bustled through the kitchen. My parents invited dozens of guests, business partners, neighbors, family friends, and everyone was told how special my sister was. She would open a mountain of gifts while photographers clicked away. My dad beamed at her as if she were a princess, and my mom's smile stretched wider than the expensive pearl necklace she always wore for those occasions. I remember tugging at my mom's sleeve once, whispering that maybe my next birthday could have a few balloons too. She looked down at me with that cold half-smile and said, "Olivia brings people together, Emily, and you should be proud of her." That was her way of saying no. High school only deepened the divide. Olivia's dance recitals were attended by every relative we had. She always got the front page of the family scrapbook with her perfect curls and her pink tutu. When I won the state spelling bee, my dad clapped politely, said, "Of course you did. Well, you had nothing else to distract you." There was no party, no framed certificate hung on the wall. My achievements were expected, almost invisible. The pattern followed us into adulthood. In 2010, I earned a scholarship to Boston University. I was so proud, so sure my parents would be thrilled that I had lifted a financial burden off their shoulders. Instead, my dad muttered that teaching was such a modest career for someone with my background. Olivia had enrolled at Brown that same year, but she dropped out after 3 semesters. My parents never criticized her. They only said she was too bright to be confined by traditional education, and they bought her a condo downtown to give her space to discover herself. When I graduated in a simple navy gown, I scanned the crowd for my parents. They were there, but the applause they gave me was faint, distracted. Later, my mom whispered that my hair looked flat under the cap. Olivia, who had not even finished college, still received more praise that night than I did for 4 years of hard work. It was Patricia, my godmother, who noticed. She had been my mom's closest friend back in their college days, but somewhere along the line they fell apart. I remember overhearing a fight when I was a teenager. Patricia, raising her voice, telling my mom that I deserved to feel loved as much as Olivia. My mom hissed that Patricia should mind her own business. That was the last time I ever saw them together. Patricia sent birthday cards for a few years, but eventually even those stopped, and I grew used to the quiet absence. As I sat in my parents' living room on Christmas Eve, the firelight reflecting off the crystal ornaments, those memories came rushing back. I watched Olivia lean comfortably against the velvet sofa while my mom poured her another glass of wine, smiling like a hostess entertaining royalty. My dad scribbled in his leather notebook, nodding at every suggestion Olivia made for the Christmas dinner. My children sat silently at the edge of their chairs, Grace's hands folded in her lap, Ethan staring down at the polished floorboards. It was as if the decades had folded into one moment. Every slight, every dismissal layered into the air between us. I could still feel the sting of my dad's words from years ago, calling me practical as if it were a flaw, telling me I should be grateful for stability when Olivia was given freedom. My mom's face forever tilted toward my sister, never toward me. Olivia caught my eye across the room and smirked. It was the same smirk she wore at my 10th birthday when she blew out my candles. I realized she knew exactly what she was doing, then and now. And my parents allowed it because it was easier to idolize her than to recognize me. Grace nudged me gently and whispered, "Mom, do you think Grandma liked my drawing?" I forced a smile, but I remembered how many of her pictures had been tucked into a drawer, never taped to the refrigerator the way Olivia's childhood sketches once were. Ethan shifted closer, pressing his small shoulder against mine for comfort. My chest tightened as I sat there, smiling faintly at the conversation I was not invited into, holding on to my children who deserved so much better. For years, I told myself that enduring it was noble, that keeping peace at the family table mattered more than my pride. But in that moment, with Olivia glowing under the spotlight and my children shrinking under the weight of silence, I felt something inside me stir. The piano in the next room began to play a carol, and the notes drifted in, sweet but hollow. I looked at the towering tree with its gold ribbons and crystal ornaments, at my mom's satisfied smile, at my dad's sharp profile, and then back at Olivia's smug expression. A voice inside me, one I had buried long ago, whispered that enough was enough. I sat a little straighter, my hand resting firmly on Grace's shoulder, the other around Ethan's. For the first time in a long time, I did not feel small. I did not feel invisible. I felt the weight of years pressing down, but I also felt the faint beginnings of a resolve I had never let myself imagine. The sound of glasses clinking jolted me back to the present. Olivia laughed loudly. My parents joined in, and the moment passed for them. But not for me. For me, something had already shifted. Something that could not be unshaken. The dining room shimmered under the light of the chandelier, casting a golden glow across the polished mahogany table. Crystal goblets sparkled, silver cutlery gleamed, and the scent of rosemary and garlic floated in the air. My children sat at the far end of the table beside me, their little bodies straight as boards, trying to remember every lesson I had whispered about table manners. Across from us, Olivia leaned back comfortably, her hand resting on the stem of her wine glass as if she owned the evening. She spoke easily, her voice rising above the quiet clinking of utensils. Last summer in Saint-Tropez, the weather was perfect. We stayed right on the water, and the villa had the most breathtaking view. Then she laughed softly, a sound rehearsed for admiration. My mom's eyes sparkled as she leaned closer. "Tell me more about the villa, darling. Was it the one you showed me in that magazine?" Olivia nodded, her smile broadening. Yes, the very one. Dad insisted I deserved it. My dad, sitting at the head of the table, cleared his throat with approval. "Of course. Only the best for Olivia. You work hard at making us proud." Grace reached for her glass of water carefully, her fingers trembling. She glanced at me, her hazel eyes searching mine, but I only gave her a small nod, urging her to stay calm. Ethan poked at his plate, the fork scraping lightly against the china. The sound drew a sharp glance from my mom. "Richard, did you hear that? Emily's children really must learn to be less fidgety at the table." Heat spread across my chest, but I kept my smile steady. "They are only children, Mom. They are doing their best." Olivia lifted her fork delicately, her rings catching the light. Maybe they just need more practice. When we were little, I never fidgeted at the table. Dad used to say I was born with poise. My dad chuckled, pleased by the memory. That is true. You always carried yourself like a young lady. I swallowed hard, the bite of food in my mouth turning to ash. Grace dropped her gaze to her lap, her small fingers clutching her napkin. Ethan pressed his lips together tightly, his little face reddening. I wanted to reach for them both, to shield them from every word, but I sat still, my hand resting lightly on the edge of the table. The chatter around me continued, a chorus of admiration for Olivia, every sentence sharpening the invisible line that divided us. Olivia leaned forward, her tone bright. I have been thinking of spending a few weeks in Europe again this spring. Florence this time. Perhaps Paris. I think it is important to expose ourselves to culture. My mom sighed with delight. Yes, of course. It broadens the mind. That is why you are so refined, Olivia. I watched Grace's lips part slightly, almost as if she might speak, then close again. She wanted to share her own dream, the way she drew pictures of Paris and taped them to her bedroom wall, but she stayed silent. Ethan took a sip of water, his eyes fixed on his plate. The ache in my chest deepened, a familiar ache that had grown with me since childhood. The same ache I had felt on birthdays, graduations, every holiday where Olivia's voice filled the air while mine was drowned out. But seeing it play out again, this time with my children caught in the line of fire, felt unbearable. My dad reached for his notebook again, scribbling something between bites of roasted lamb. He barely glanced at me, his pen scratching against the page. Grace whispered softly, just loud enough for me to hear. Mom, do you think Grandma liked my drawing? I forced a smile and squeezed her hand under the table. Of course she did, sweetheart. But I knew the truth. I had seen my mom take that carefully drawn picture earlier, holding it with 2 fingers, as though it might soil her silk blouse, then hand it to Helen to put away. Not a word of admiration. Not even a smile. Just another dismissal. Ethan shifted closer, his shoulder brushing mine. His voice trembled as he whispered, Mom, did we do something wrong? My throat tightened. No, honey, you did nothing wrong. Olivia's laugh rang out again, filling the silence between us. She raised her glass toward my parents. To my family, the people who make life worth living. The words stung more than they should have, dripping with irony, because I knew who she meant. To her, family meant admiration, gifts, money, vacations, and the endless approval that followed her like a shadow. To me, it had always meant silence and sacrifice. I sat still, the chatter continuing around me, the fire popping in the hearth, the crystal glasses clinking. My smile remained fixed, but inside something had begun to unravel. I could feel the edges of my composure fraying, the weight of years pressing down harder than ever. I lifted my glass of water and took a slow sip, watching the condensation trail down the side. The chandelier's light refracted through the crystal, scattering golden flecks across the white tablecloth. Everything looked perfect, polished, untouchable. But beneath the shine, I could see the cracks forming. Cracks no one else wanted to admit were there. Olivia turned to my mom and began recounting another story of a gala she had attended in New York, her voice brimming with pride. My parents leaned in, captivated, as if every word she spoke was a jewel to be treasured. I looked down the table at my children, their small frames swallowed by the grandeur of the setting, their voices silenced, their worth questioned, and I knew deep down that something had to change. The laughter of my family swelled again, but in my ears it sounded hollow, like glass about to shatter. I slipped out of the dining room quietly, telling Grace and Ethan I needed a moment. They nodded, their small faces pale under the chandelier's glow. My chest felt tight, and I needed air, even if it was just the kind that drifted in from the kitchen with the scent of roasted lamb and garlic butter. The house had always felt like a stage, every room lit just right, every corner curated for display. But the kitchen, late at night, often revealed the cracks. Helen was gone, probably setting more dishes in the pantry, and the lights were dimmer here. I paused when I heard voices, my mom's, sharp and clipped, and Olivia's, smooth and satisfied. I froze, pressing my back against the doorway, the marble counter cool against my palm. My mom's voice carried first. Emily will break eventually. She always does. She has no backbone. Never did. Olivia gave a soft laugh. I almost felt sorry for her. But really, it is better this way. She can handle the scraps. Besides, we both know she has no choice. My stomach turned, but I couldn't move. My mom continued, her tone icy. We need her. Richard and I have talked, and Olivia, you know we cannot keep this up forever. The creditors are circling, and if the investigation digs any deeper, well, appearances must be maintained. Emily still believes she owes us. She will carry it if we push hard enough. Olivia's laugh grew louder. That is true. She has always been easy to bend. Let her think it is her duty. Once she agrees, she will bury herself under our weight, and no one will blame us. The words sank into me like stones. My pulse pounded in my ears as the truth twisted inside me. All these years, I had told myself their coldness was personal, that it was simply favoritism, a cruel habit they could not break. But this was calculated. They wanted to break me down, to make me accept responsibility for debts I didn't create, to use me like a shield against the storm they had brought upon themselves. Footsteps echoed closer, and I ducked behind the pantry door. Olivia's heels clicked against the tile as she crossed the kitchen. She poured herself another glass of wine, humming softly. She looked radiant under the soft light, but I could see the edges of her confidence. Her hand trembled slightly when she lifted the glass, and her smile faltered before she caught herself. My mom joined her at the counter, pressing her manicured hand against Olivia's arm. Do not worry. Emily will fold. She always does. And if she hesitates, your dad will remind her. Olivia tilted her glass, her voice smooth again. Then let us make sure tonight is the night she remembers her place. I felt the words slice through me. My hands trembled, and I pressed them hard against my skirt to steady myself. The urge to storm into the room, to scream that I had heard every word, boiled up inside me. But instead, I stayed silent, my breath shallow. They moved toward the doorway, their voices fading as they returned to the dining room. I stayed hidden until the sound of their laughter blended with the hum of conversation from the other room. When I finally stepped out, the kitchen looked the same as always. Polished counters, gleaming appliances, everything spotless. But it felt different now. I knew their plan. They weren't just indifferent parents favoring one daughter over another. They were preparing to use me as their safety net, to crush me under their mistakes while Olivia floated free. I leaned against the counter, my palms pressed flat against the cold stone, and closed my eyes. My breath came in slow, deliberate pulls. For years I had endured their scorn in silence, telling myself that keeping the peace mattered more than my pride. But this wasn't about pride anymore. This was about survival, mine and my children's. When I returned to the dining room, Olivia was laughing again, her head tilted back, the wine glass glinting in her hand. My dad nodded along with her story, my mom hanging on every word. Grace and Ethan sat stiffly, their food barely touched. I slid back into my chair, my smile calm, my hands steady as I laid my napkin across my lap. No one noticed the difference, but inside, I felt the shift. They thought they could bend me the way they always had, but this time they had shown me too much. I looked down the table at my children, their small faces tight with worry. My chest swelled with a determination I hadn't felt in years. I would not let them grow up believing this treatment was normal. I would not let them inherit my silence. As Olivia launched into another story about her latest shopping trip in New York, her laughter ringing through the room, I kept my gaze steady. I smiled when they looked at me, nodding politely, but my mind was elsewhere. I knew then that the night would not end the way they expected. Something inside me had already begun to harden, and for the first time, I welcomed it. The fire in the living room crackled, but it did nothing to cut through the chill that had settled over me. Dinner plates clinked as Helen cleared the table, her quiet efficiency the only steady rhythm in a night that felt like it was unraveling. Piece by piece, my dad leaned back in his chair, his notebook open, the same one he used for business meetings. His gold pen tapped against the page. My dad adjusted his glasses and spoke in that tone I had known since childhood, the one that sounded like a verdict. Emily, while Olivia is staying here, you will contribute to the household expenses. It is only fair." Olivia smirked, swirling the last of her wine. She glanced at me, her lips curling into a smile that carried no warmth. "Think of it as helping family," she said sweetly, though her eyes glittered with triumph. My heart raced, but I kept my face calm. "And what about my children?" I asked. "Are they not considered family at this table?" My mom stiffened. Her gaze was steady, but cold, as though she was talking about strangers. "Grace and Ethan will eat whatever is left in the kitchen. This is not complicated." Ethan's hand clutched mine under the table, his small fingers squeezing tight. Grace's eyes filled with confusion, though she said nothing. Her lips pressed together in a thin line. My dad tapped his pen again, his voice sharper now. "Enough of this emotional display. Go set the table properly for dessert, Emily. Do what you do best, and be useful." For a moment the room blurred. The polished chandelier lights seemed too bright, Olivia's laughter too loud, the clink of crystal glasses too sharp. I felt years of swallowed words press against my chest, and for once I did not swallow them back. I rose slowly, my chair scraping the floor. Grace and Ethan looked up at me, their faces pale but hopeful. I squeezed their hands gently. "Get your jackets," I whispered. "We are leaving." The room fell silent. Olivia let out a high laugh, shaking her head. "Here we go again," she said. "Always the dramatic one." My dad's voice thundered across the table. "Sit down, Emily. You are embarrassing yourself." I stood taller, meeting his glare. "Number, I will not sit. Not tonight." My mom's face twisted, her wineglass trembling slightly in her hand. "You cannot walk out. Family loyalty demands better than this." I almost laughed at the word loyalty. The hypocrisy of it, so sharp it almost cut through me. "Loyalty goes both ways," I said evenly, "and my children will not sit here another second to be treated like they do not matter." I took Grace and Ethan's hands, guiding them toward the hallway. Their little feet echoed against the marble floor, the sound unnaturally loud in the silence. Behind me, my dad barked, "If you leave now, do not expect our help when you come crawling back." I turned, my voice steady but fierce. "Help," I repeated. "You never helped when I needed it most. Not when Thomas left, not when Grace needed braces, not when Ethan needed childcare so I could work. You gave me judgment, not help. That ends tonight." Olivia stepped into the hallway doorway, blocking us for a moment. She leaned casually against the frame, though her eyes betrayed something restless. "You know they only invited you here because they need something from you," she whispered. "I told them you would never agree unless they broke you first." The truth in her words hit me, but it also cleared the fog. They had revealed themselves fully tonight. I did not need to wonder anymore. "Move, Olivia," I said quietly. She smirked, but there was hesitation before she stepped aside, letting me pass. Grace and Ethan hurried to the coat rack, slipping into their jackets with fumbling hands. I knelt in front of them, my voice low and calm. "We are going to have a special dinner somewhere else, somewhere we will be treated the way we deserve." Grace's eyes widened. "Are you sure, Mom? Grandma looks so mad." I brushed her hair back gently. "I am very sure." I rose and opened the heavy oak door. The winter air rushed in, sharp and bracing against my cheeks. Behind me, I could still hear their voices, rising and overlapping. My dad's orders, my mom's pleas, Olivia's mocking laugh. But I did not turn back. As we stepped onto the stone steps, Ethan slipped his small hand into mine. "Are we in trouble, Mom?" he asked softly. I looked down at him, my chest tightening with pride and pain all at once. "No, sweetheart. For the first time in a long time, we are finally out of trouble." We walked toward the driveway where my car waited, its old frame dull beside the gleaming luxury cars lined up in a row. The night sky stretched above us, cold and endless. But I felt lighter with every step away from the house. The voices behind us grew faint as the door shut hard, sealing them inside with their schemes and their pride. Ahead of us was uncertainty, but it was ours. I unlocked the car, the sound of the door latches snapping open, breaking the silence. Grace and Ethan climbed into the back seat, their faces still pale, but their eyes brighter. I slid into the driver's seat, my hands gripping the wheel. For a long moment I sat there, the engine silent, listening to the soft sound of my children breathing behind me. I could still feel the heat of the dining room, the sting of my dad's words, the icy dismissal in my mom's tone. But I could also feel something else, rising slowly, steady and strong. I turned the key, and the old engine rumbled to life. The road stretched ahead, slick with melting snow, the kind that reflected streetlights like broken glass. Grace and Ethan sat quietly in the back seat, their tired faces half hidden under their winter hats. I could still hear my dad's voice echoing in my head, telling me to set the table like a servant, as if I should be grateful for the scraps of their affection. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, keeping my voice steady as I said, "We're getting dinner somewhere better." I didn't know where that would be until I saw the glow of Morton's Steakhouse at the end of the block. Warm light spilled through the windows, gold against the cold night. I parked the car, straightened my coat, and led the kids inside. Grace looked uncertain, like she wasn't sure we belonged here. Ethan whispered, "Mom, this looks expensive." I smiled and squeezed his hand. Tonight, we deserve to feel welcome somewhere. The hostess gave us a polite smile and said there'd be a short wait. 15 minutes later, we were sitting in a booth under soft lights, the sound of quiet laughter around us. When the waiter brought menus, Grace's eyes grew wide. She ran her finger down the list like it was a treasure map. "Can I really order salmon?" she asked. "Yes," I said, "and dessert, too." Ethan grinned, and for the first time that evening, I saw him smile without hesitation. Watching them eat felt like breathing again after years of holding my breath. Halfway through the meal, my phone buzzed on the table. The name flashing across the screen made my stomach tighten. Mom. I turned the phone face down. It buzzed again, then again. My dad, Olivia, then voicemail notifications, one after another. I didn't need to listen. I already knew the tone. Disbelief, outrage, control. Grace noticed the sound. "Are you going to answer?" "Not tonight," I said quietly. When the waiter brought the check, I paid without thinking about my bank balance for once. I just wanted this night to mean something. As we stepped back into the cold air, I felt my resolve solidify. I had spent years surviving their approval. Tonight, I had stopped asking for it. Back at the apartment, after tucking the kids into bed, I sat at the kitchen table with the phone in my hand. The messages blinked. 17 missed calls, 26 texts. I scrolled through the first few. "Mom, you are being dramatic. Come back before your dad decides he's done helping." "Dad, you walked out on your family. Think carefully before you ruin this." "Olivia, you've always been jealous. You'll regret this." My throat tightened, but not from sadness anymore. It was something sharper, quieter. I thought of all the years I'd spent being their afterthought. Then I remembered Helen's whisper earlier that night. "It's tense tonight. Be careful." I opened my contacts list and scrolled to a name I hadn't called in years. Patricia Montgomery. My godmother. She'd always sent cards, birthdays, holidays, each one signed with the same line. "If you ever need me, call." I hesitated. The phone rang twice before a warm voice answered. "Emily, it's so good to hear your voice." "Hi, Patricia. I hope it's not too late. It's never too late for you. Are you all right?" I took a breath. Number. Not tonight. But maybe I'm finally ready to fix that. I told her everything. The dinner, the humiliation, the way my dad's words cut through the room. I told the guilt I carried, as if their mistakes were mine to pay for. Patricia didn't interrupt. She just listened. When I finished, she spoke softly. "Emily, I've waited a long time for you to call me. I need to tell you something. Your parents came to me a year ago, desperate for help. They mortgaged their home through my firm. I hold the note on that house." I froze. They thought I'd never act on it. But I've watched you suffer long enough. If you give me your consent, I can move forward tonight. The air seemed to still. For years, I had begged them for compassion, for acknowledgement, for love. Now, I lowered my voice. "What happens if you act?" Patricia hesitated. "They'll be notified tomorrow. It will force everything into the open. Are you sure this is what you want?" I stared at the wall, at the photos of Grace and Ethan taped up by the kitchen calendar, the edges curling. I thought of their small faces at that dinner table, how they looked at me for protection and saw silence instead. "Yes," I said finally. "Do it. Patricia exhaled softly. You sound stronger than I've ever heard you. I'll make the call tonight. And Emily, you don't owe them your silence anymore. When I hung up, the apartment was still. The heater hummed softly, and I could hear the faint rhythm of my children breathing through their bedroom door. I set the phone down on the table and stared at it for a long time. I had always imagined revenge as loud, fiery, something that would make me feel powerful. But in that quiet kitchen, it didn't feel like rage. It felt like a release. Hours later, my phone lit up again, but I didn't answer. I already knew what was happening. My parents would wake to calls from the bank. Olivia's accounts would freeze. The house that had always represented their pride would finally bear the truth. They had hidden behind its white columns. I leaned back in the chair, closing my eyes. I hadn't screamed or fought or begged. I had just made one call, and that one call was enough to change everything. By morning, the world outside my window looked untouched. Soft snow covering the streets like nothing had happened. But my phone told a different story. It started vibrating before sunrise and didn't stop. Private numbers, unfamiliar area codes, then texts one after another. What did you do? Call me immediately. This is urgent. Olivia, are you out of your mind? I set the phone face down on the table. Great Ethan snoring softly on the couch under a blanket. The heater buzzed against the winter cold, and I sat there, holding my coffee, watching the steam curl upward. It took just one call, I thought. One quiet call. Around 9, Patricia phoned. Her voice was calm, professional, the same tone she had used when she helped me sign my first lease years ago. Emily, they've been notified. The bank has frozen their accounts. The legal filings will arrive by noon. There will be calls, emails, attempts to manipulate you. Stay quiet. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. Thank you, Patricia. You did the hard part, dear. You finally stood up. When I hung up, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Control. Not over them, but over myself. By 11, the pounding started. Someone was at the door, hitting it hard enough to make the walls tremble. I froze. For a moment, I thought about ignoring it, but then I saw a flash of color through the peephole. Olivia's red coat. I opened the door halfway. Her mascara had smeared, her hair unbrushed, her voice raw. Emily, you have to talk to them. They're losing everything. The bank, the house, the company. It's all shutting down. I kept my tone calm. I told you last night. They brought this on themselves. She shook her head, stepping closer. You don't understand. They're saying you betrayed them. That you turned Patricia against them. I folded my arms. Patricia didn't need convincing. She knew the truth long before I did. Olivia blinked, stunned by my composure. She looked like a child who'd run out of excuses. I could see the panic written all over her face. For once, she wasn't the golden sister. She was just another person watching everything she built collapse. Behind her, a car door slammed. My dad's deep voice carried across the lot. Emily, open this door right now. I didn't move. I watched him through the window. His face was red from the cold and from anger. He pounded his fist against a doorframe. Do you have any idea what you've done? We could lose everything. I finally opened the door just a few inches. Dad, you already lost everything. You just didn't realize it until now. His voice dropped low. You think you're better than us because you made one phone call? No, I said quietly. I just finally stopped pretending you couldn't be held accountable. Margaret appeared beside him, her hands shaking. Her eyes looked wet, but I couldn't tell if it was from tears or cold. Please, Emily, you can fix this. Talk to Patricia. Tell her it was a mistake. I almost laughed. A mistake? Treating me like I didn't belong in my own family was a mistake. Making my children feel small was a mistake. But this was a choice. Richard slammed his palm against the door again, his control slipping. I raised my hand and said firmly, "Enough." The sound startled even me. Grace peeked out from the hallway, her eyes wide. I turned to her with a small smile. Go back to your room, sweetheart. Everything's fine. When I looked back, Olivia's expression had softened. I think she finally understood that the dynamic had shifted forever. She whispered, Emily, what do you want from us? I thought for a long second. The truth. And a little peace. That's all I ever wanted. I closed the door gently, not slamming it, just enough to make the message clear. Behind it, I heard voices, angry, panicked, confused. Then car doors slamming again, and the sound of an engine starting. The apartment fell silent, except for the hum of the refrigerator and the faint ticking of the wall clock. I leaned against the door, my hands trembling slightly, not from fear, but from something else. Release. An hour later, Patricia called again. "They're furious," she said, "but it's done. They'll have to vacate within 60 days. The firm will handle everything from here." I exhaled slowly. "Thank you." "You don't need to thank me," she said. "Just promise me one thing. Don't ever let them pull you back into the chaos." I smiled faintly. I think that part of me is gone. That evening, I took Grace and Ethan to the park near our apartment. The sky had turned pink with the last light of winter. They ran across the frozen grass, their laughter echoing in the cold air. Watching them, I felt something deep and still. Peace mixed with pride. For years, I had imagined revenge would feel like victory. But standing there, it didn't feel like winning. It felt like freedom. And somewhere across town, in that mansion glowing with hundreds of white lights, my parents were realizing what it meant to finally lose control. Hours later, as night settled over Boston, my phone buzzed one last time. A single text from an unknown number. "You made your point." I smiled, turned the phone off, and looked out the window at the falling snow. Maybe I had, but more than that, I had found my voice. And once you find that, no one can take it away. By the next afternoon, the snow had started to melt, leaving the streets wet and gray. I was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee that had gone cold when I heard the first knock at the door. It was softer than yesterday, hesitant almost, but I already knew who it would be. My parents never left things unfinished, not when they thought they could still control the outcome. I opened the door and saw my mom standing there, bundled in her wool coat, her eyes swollen from what looked like sleeplessness. Behind her, my dad stood rigid, his expression unreadable. "Emily, may we come in?" my mom asked, her voice trembling slightly. I stepped aside, motioning them toward the living room. The air between us was heavy. Grace and Ethan were at school, and for once, I was glad they didn't have to witness this. My dad looked around the small apartment like he had stepped into another world. It was clean, but modest, with secondhand furniture and children's drawings taped along the walls. He ran his hand across the back of a chair and muttered something about the heating. I stayed standing. "What do you want?" I asked, keeping my tone even. My mom sat on the couch, her gloved hands clenched together. "We came to apologize," she said. But the way she said it made it sound like a performance, not a confession. My dad shifted beside her. "Patricia is ruthless, Emily. You have no idea what you've done by involving her." I folded my arms. I didn't involve her. I told her the truth. She acted on what she already knew. He looked at me with disbelief, as though my calmness offended him. "You think this makes you strong," he said quietly. "You've destroyed your own family over a petty argument." I shook my head. "No, Dad. You destroyed it when you decided your pride was more important than your children's dignity." My mom's eyes filled with tears. "We were wrong," she said softly, "about how we treated you, about Christmas. But we were under so much pressure. You don't understand what it's like to have everything falling apart." I felt a strange sympathy tug at me, but I didn't let it take over. "I do understand," I said. "I just never made other people pay for it." For a long moment, none of us spoke. The sound of traffic outside filled the silence. My dad finally broke it. "We are going to lose the house," he said flatly. "Patricia won't reconsider. Unless—" He didn't finish the sentence, but I knew what he meant. "Unless I convinced her. Unless I saved them." I took a slow breath. "You want me to fix what you broke. You want me to go to Patricia and beg her to forgive you." My mom looked up quickly. "We wouldn't ask if it wasn't desperate. You could talk to her. She listens to you." I studied their faces, the same faces that had once looked down on me at the dinner table, that had watched as my children were humiliated. Now they were smaller somehow, older, stripped of their certainty. "Why would she listen to me?" I asked softly. My dad sighed. "Because she cares about you. She always did. That was clear from the start. That's true, I said. And maybe that's the difference. She actually saw me. For the first time, I saw my dad falter. His voice cracked as he spoke. I didn't mean to hurt you, Emily. I only wanted the best for you. I met his eyes. You wanted what was easiest for you. There's a difference. He said nothing after that. The silence stretched until my mom stood, adjusting her coat. I understand if you can't forgive us, she said, her voice breaking. But please think of your sister. She's lost everything too. I felt a flicker of anger. Olivia lost comfort. I lost respect. Those are not the same thing. When they left, I stood by the window and watched their car pull away, leaving tire tracks in the slush. I didn't cry. I didn't feel triumphant either. Just quiet. Later that evening, I met Patricia at a small cafe near the harbor. She looked elegant as always, a navy coat draped over her shoulders. When I walked in, she smiled like she had been expecting me. I told her what happened, about my parents' visit, their pleas, their apologies. She stirred her tea slowly. Do you want me to stop the foreclosure? She asked. I looked down at my hands, at the faint coffee stain on my sleeve. I don't know. Patricia nodded. That's honest. I'll give you time to decide. But remember, protecting them can't come at the cost of your peace. We talked for another hour, not about money or revenge, but about boundaries, about how hard it is to stop being the child who wants to please. She told me that sometimes real forgiveness begins when you stop trying to fix people who never fixed you. When I got home, the kids were already asleep. The apartment smelled faintly of the cookies Ethan had baked with our neighbor. I walked into their room, kissed their foreheads, and felt something unclench inside me. I went to the window and looked out over the quiet street. The world felt different. Not lighter, exactly, but real. For years, I had been waiting for an apology that would make things right. Now I realized I didn't need one to move on. Tomorrow, I will decide what to tell Patricia. Tonight, I just let myself breathe, the snow outside falling softly against the glass, erasing every footprint that led back to the house I no longer called home. The first sign that everything had spilled into the open came 2 days later, when I pulled into the grocery store lot and saw my parents' faces staring back at me from the cover of the local paper. The headline screamed about Richard Wilson's real estate empire under federal investigation. There was a smaller picture of Olivia stepping out of a courthouse with her head down, the caption hinting at foreclosure filings. I froze with my hands on the steering wheel, my stomach flipping. For years, they had lived as though nothing could touch them. Now the whole town knew. Inside the store, I felt eyes on me. A woman from church avoided my gaze near the produce aisle, then leaned to whisper to her husband. At the checkout line, a cashier who had always been polite stared at me with open curiosity before bagging my groceries. I kept my head high, but inside I was trembling. Not from shame, but from the realization that the secret storm had finally broken. By the time I returned home, Olivia was sitting on my front steps. She looked smaller than I had ever seen her. Her designer coat wrinkled, her hair pulled back without care. She jumped up when she saw me, her eyes red from crying. Emily, you have to help me. The press is everywhere. I can't go anywhere without cameras. I unlocked the door calmly, shifting the bags in my arms. Help you how, Olivia? By letting you keep pretending nothing is your fault? She followed me. Inside, her words tumbling out. Bradley is filing for full custody. He says I am unstable, that I squandered everything. He won't even let me pick up the kids without supervision. Her voice cracked on the last word. And for a moment, I saw not the perfect sister who had always lorded her life over me, but a woman stripped bare. I set the groceries down and faced her. Olivia, you built your life on appearances. Now the appearances are gone. What matters is what you do from here. She shook her head, covering her face with her hands. I don't know how to be anything else. Before I could answer, my phone rang. It was Patricia. I stepped outside to take the call. Her voice was steady, as always. Emily, I wanted you to know that the banks have begun formal proceedings. Your parents will be forced to vacate the mansion within 60 days. I pressed the phone tighter. They know? Oh, they know. and I imagine they will be at your door again soon. But this time, you will be ready." When I hung up, a neighbor was standing across the street, holding her morning paper. She gave me a knowing look, half pity, half curiosity. For the first time in my life, I did not shrink from it. I nodded politely and went back inside. Olivia was pacing the living room, her hands fluttering at her sides. "The kids don't respect me, Emily. They see me as weak now. Even Mom and Dad, they look at me like I am a disappointment." I almost laughed at the irony. "Now you know how it feels," I said quietly. She froze, then sank onto the couch, covering her face again. I wanted to hate her, but I couldn't. Not entirely. The following evening, the news stations ran a segment showing my dad leaving his office surrounded by reporters. His voice was sharp, trying to control the narrative, but his words were drowned out by the questions. She was filmed being ushered into a car, her expression tight, her pearl necklace gleaming like armor. Grace watched from the couch, her eyes wide. "Mom, why are Grandma and Grandpa on TV?" I sat beside her, pulling her close, because sometimes people make mistakes, and when they hide them too long, the truth comes out. Ethan leaned against me. "Are we going to be on TV too?" "No, sweetheart," I said, smoothing his hair. "We are safe here." But even as I spoke, a knock rattled the door. It was sharp, insistent, too familiar. Grace and Ethan tensed, their small bodies stiff against me. I stood, my heart steady, and walked to the door. Through the peephole I saw them. My dad, his tie loose, his face pale. My mom, clutching her handbag like a lifeline. They looked older, diminished, stripped of the aura they had always carried. I placed my hand on the doorknob, but did not turn it yet. Behind me, Olivia whispered from the couch, "They're here, aren't they?" Her voice shook, and for the first time in my life, she sounded afraid of the same people who had once made me feel so small. I closed my eyes, drew in a slow breath, and prepared to face them. I opened the door just enough to let the cold air rush in. Dad's eyes locked on mine, the sharpness dulled, but still there under the weight of defeat. Mom's lips trembled, her hand gripping the strap of her handbag so tightly her knuckles were white. For a long moment, none of us spoke, the silence heavier than any argument we had ever had. Finally, he cleared his throat. "Emily, we need to come in." I didn't step aside. "Why?" He shifted uncomfortably, glancing back at the empty hallway as if worried neighbors might overhear. "Because everything is falling apart. We cannot manage it alone." Behind him, her voice softer than I had ever heard it. "Please, Emily, you are our daughter." The words stung, not because they sounded sincere, but because they were the same words they had always used when they needed something from me. For years, daughter had been a label they wielded like a leash. I straightened my shoulders. "You can come in, but we are doing this my way." They entered slowly, looking around my modest apartment with barely concealed discomfort. Olivia rose from the couch, her eyes wide. "Mom, Dad." She went to her first, clutching her hands. "We will fix this, darling." Olivia's face crumbled. "Fix it how? I have nothing left." He cut her off, his voice clipped. "We need Emily's help. Patricia is holding the mortgage. She is threatening to take the house." I crossed my arms. "She is not threatening. She is acting on what you agreed to." His jaw tightened. "You would side with her against your own family." I met his glare evenly. The family does not treat children like servants. The family does not tell grandchildren to eat scraps. The room went quiet. Grace and Ethan peeked from their bedroom door, their eyes wide. I motioned gently for them to stay put. She sank into a chair, looking smaller than I had ever seen her. "What do you want from us, Emily?" For the first time, I realized I had power in this room. My voice was steady. "Respect. For me. For my children. If you want my help, it comes with boundaries." He scoffed, but his voice lacked the authority it once held. "And what if we say no? Then you walk out that door and figure it out without me," I said calmly. Olivia turned, desperation softening her face. "Emily, please. I know I mocked you. I know I made you feel less, but I have nowhere else to go." Her voice cracked, and for once I saw her as human, not as the golden child who had everything. I took a slow breath. "You can stay here for 2 weeks, but you will follow my rules. You will treat Grace and Ethan kindly, and after that, you will find your own way." Olivia nodded quickly, as though afraid I might take the offer back. "Thank you." He started to protest, but Mom touched his arm, silencing him. She looked at me, her eyes wet. "We will agree." For the next hour, the conversation unraveled, truths spilling like loose threads. He admitted the company had been losing money for years, each new deal riskier than the last. She confessed to pawning heirlooms to cover expenses. Olivia admitted the mountain of debt she had hidden from Bradley until it destroyed their marriage. Each revelation was sharp, but instead of cutting me down, it carved away the illusion I had carried for so long. At one point, Ethan came out with his blanket, rubbing his eyes. "Mom, are they staying here?" I crouched down and brushed his hair back, just for a little while. "And only if they are kind." He nodded solemnly, glancing at Olivia. She managed a small smile, tentative and unsure. Later, after they left to gather their things, the apartment was quiet again. Olivia remained behind, sitting at the table with her hands folded. She looked at me, her eyes tired. "I do not know how to do this without pretending anymore." "You start by being honest," I said. "With yourself, with everyone." She gave a shaky nod, and for the first time I believed she might try. Week passed. Patricia's attorney drew up the trust, securing the future for Grace and Ethan. The mansion was sold, the proceeds swallowed by debts. My parents moved into a small condo across town. They visited sometimes, awkward and subdued, but for the first time, they treated my children with genuine warmth. Olivia found part-time work at a boutique, her pride bruised but her steps steadier. 6 months later, I stood in the backyard of the house Patricia had helped me buy, watching Grace and Ethan chase each other across the grass. The air was warm, the sun low. Olivia sat on the porch steps, laughing softly at something Ethan said. My parents arrived carrying store-bought pie, and no one criticized it. For once, the table we gathered around felt equal. As I cleared the dishes that evening, my dad approached me. He shifted awkwardly, his hands in his pockets. "You have built a good life, Emily. A better one than we ever gave you." It was not an apology, but it was the closest he had ever come, and I accepted it. That night, after everyone left, I tucked Grace and Ethan into bed. Ethan whispered, "Mom, are we safe now?" "Yes, sweetheart," I said. "We are safe." I closed their door and leaned against the wall, feeling a peace I had never known. For years, I thought loyalty meant silence, that love meant sacrifice without limits. But now I understand the truth. Boundaries are not walls. They are gates. And for the first time, I held the key. If you are listening and you have lived through something similar, if you have carried the weight of a family that only valued you when you served their needs, I want to hear from you. Share your story in the comments, because your voice matters. And if this journey spoke to you, please like and subscribe so these stories can reach others who need to know. They are not alone. As I turned off the lights and the house settled into quiet, I smiled to myself. We had walked away from scraps, and we had built something better. And that was only the beginning.